Hello, my name is Patrick Burke, Green River Wildlife Biologist. In this presentation, we'll be providing a brief overview of herd status, as well as some proposed changes for the 2023 hunting season for herds in the Green River Wildlife Biologist District. So we will be talking about changes for the 2023 hunting seasons that have been proposed for chapters 5, 6, and 7, which is antelope, deer, and elk respectively. There are also proposals for small game, upland game birds, waterfowl, wild turkey, and wild bison that can be found in other presentations on the WGFD website, as well as some proposed changes to the Chapter 2 General Hunting Regulation chapter. Any changes that have been proposed from the 2022 seasons are highlighted in red, and deletions are red with strike through. This presentation will cover hunt areas that fall within the Green River Biologist District, which is in the Green River region in the southwest part of the state. So we'll get started with Chapter 5, which is antelope. The first herd we'll talk about is Sublette Pronghorn, which occupies most of the Green River Basin from Jackson and Pinedale down the South Pass and over the Kemmer and then down to Rock Springs. The postseason objective for this herd is 48,000 pronghorn, and after the 2022 season, this population was estimated at being just a little bit over 43,000 antelope, which puts it at about 10% under its population objective. So as we said, this herd is currently within its objective range, sitting at a little bit over 43,000 antelope after the 2022 season. And fawn ratios that we're seeing during preseason classifications, herd unit wide, were 55 fawns per 100 does, which is a pretty nice improvement over what we saw in 2021 of only 48 fawns per 100 does, but is down a little bit from the long-term average for this herd of 64 fawns per 100 does. But given those fawn ratios, this herd should still experience some moderate growth. Also in 2022, the preseason buck ratio was 56 bucks per 100 does, which is slightly above the 2019 to 2021 average of 54 bucks per 100 does, but still puts us within the recreational management guidelines of 30 to 59 bucks per 100 does. As of right now, no changes are proposed for any of the three Sublette pronghorn hunt areas that are in the Green River region. But that's with the caveat that we're still monitoring what winter mortality might look like for this herd this year. As I'm sure most of you know, the 2022-2023 has been a pretty decent winter. And while the severity of that has varied across the herd unit just because of the large geographic area that it occupies, in general, most of this herd unit has seen above average snowfall and below average temperatures. And from January 1st to February 28th of 2023, 8 of 65 collared adult female pronghorn in the herd unit had died, which equates to a roughly 12% mortality rate. However, collared pronghorn does in the Red Desert herd unit, which is just to the east of hunting area 92, had experienced a roughly 40% mortality rate during that same time period. So this suggests that survival might not be even across the herd unit, with animals in the southeastern portion of the herd potentially experiencing a little bit tougher winter conditions and possibly lower overwinter survival than some of the pronghorn in the more northern portions of the herd. So for especially area 92, we're going to be monitoring what that overwinter survival might look like and might be making some changes to some of these proposed quotas. Should also mention that we're proposing to leave in the Type 7 licenses that are good for the Farson Eden irrigation project in areas 92 and 96. During some preseason surveys in early September, we classified 397 antelope that were just living on those ag fields in the irrigation project. So we still have a pretty large number of antelope living there that we want to make sure we can keep some pressure on to alleviate some damage concerns in that area. The next herd we'll talk about is South Rock Springs Pronghorn, which is south of Interstate 80 between the Flaming Gorge Reservoir and Highway 430. So right now we're estimating this herd to be at about 5,400 antelope, which is roughly 17% under a subjective of 6,500 antelope. So this is about the 4th year in a row now that we've been estimating this herd to be at the lower end of its at objective range. In 2022, preseason classifications turned up 41 fawns per 100 does, which is about what we've been seeing on average for the last couple of years. And the buck ratio we saw was 35 bucks per 100 does. We have been seeing a little bit of a declining trend in buck ratios the last couple of years, especially in hunt area 112. This herd's been at the bottom end of its objective range since 2019. So because of that, in 2020, doe harvest was significantly reduced, hoping to help this population grow back up towards this objective of 6,500. But with the fawn ratios we've been seeing the last couple of years, it hasn't been able to do that. So we're proposing to remove the Type 6 licenses from both hunt area 59 and 112 to hopefully help this herd grow back up into its objective a little bit quicker. And right now we're proposing to leave the Type 1 licenses for both 59 and 112 where they were in 2022. But just like with Sublette Pronghorn, that includes a little bit of the caveat that it depends on what we see for winter mortality. If winter mortality starts looking like it might be worse than what we're anticipating, there's a possibility of making some adjustments there, especially with the declining buck ratio trend we've been seeing down here. Alright, so those are all the antelope hunt areas in the Green River District. So now we'll move on to Chapter 6, which is deer. The first deer herd we will talk about is Sublette deer. And the only portion of Sublette deer that's in the Green River region is hunt area 131. Area 131 is the least productive portion of the Sublette herd, and it's largely winter range with a limited number of resident deer. A lot of the deer that are wintering down by Superior in the Lucite Hills are summering up north, either in the Wind River Range somewhere or up in the Hoback Basin. The Sublette herd as a whole is a little bit under objective, with the current estimate being about 23,000 deer compared to this objective of 32,000. Herd unit wide, the fawn ratios are pretty good in this herd, with 71 fawns per 100 does being seen in 2022, and the overall buck ratio was 36 bucks per 100 does, and that's herd unit wide. The numbers in 131 are usually quite a bit lower than that for both fawns and bucks. The proposed 2023 hunting season for Area 31 is pretty similar to the seasons that have been out there in the past. It includes a short, conservative, general season that's valid for antler mule deer with 4 points or more on either antler, or any white-tailed deer. It does include a few changes to the Type 3 license that in the past had been valid for hunt area 131, 132, 133, 134, 135, and 168. We're proposing to move or remove area 131 from that and have it just be valid in 132 through 135 and 168. We're also proposing to remove the Type 6 license that was valid in the Farson Eden irrigation project. But we do still have some continuing damage concerns along the Green River, so we're proposing to leave the Type 7 license in for 2023. The other deer herd in the Green River District is the South Rock Springs deer herd, which is made up of hunt areas 101 and 102. This herd, like so many other deer herds in the West, is under objective right now. The model's having a tough time modeling this population, and we can tell from some of the other metrics we look at that it's probably underestimating herd size. But we know it's under objective. Starting in 2020, the number of licenses issued in the herd unit was reduced. And that was done because of some lower observed fawn ratios in 2016 through 2019. They were all significantly below the normal fawn ratio for this herd. So those years of lower fawn recruitment would have resulted in the pool of bucks that hunters typically select for being reduced starting in 2020. Buck fawns born during the first year of those low fawn ratios would have become 5-year-olds in 2021, which is an age that we know hunters select for based on 2 samples. So why those observed fawn ratios have been probably below what's been needed to maintain this population? The fawn ratios that we saw in 2022 was actually a pretty significant improvement, where we saw 61 fawns per 100 does, which is the highest fawn ratio that's been seen in this herd for quite some time, and well above what we've been seeing the last couple of years of only 40. So hopefully that will allow this herd to start growing back and regain some of the ground that's lost, assuming that we have good survival of those fawns over this winter. The buck ratio that was seen in 2022 was 30 bucks per 100 does, which puts us back in the lower limit of the special management criteria of 30 to 45 bucks per 100 does. But even though that we don't have as high buck ratios as we like, and we don't have as many bucks on the ground as we like, hunters have still been able to select for older age class bucks, with the average age of harvested bucks in 2022 being 5.7 years old, which is actually the highest ratio that's been observed in this herd unit. In 2022, the number of licenses in Area 102 was reduced from 200 licenses to 150. And given where we are now with observed buck ratios, I guess in short, we're proposing no changes for either of the hunt areas in this herd unit for 2023. Okay, the final chapter that this presentation will be covering is Chapter 7, Elk. And there are 2 elk herds in the Green River District. There is Steamboat elk, or Area 100, and also South Rock Springs elk, which is 30 through 32. The first elk herd we will go over is the Steamboat elk herd, or Hunt Area 100. This is a herd that's been above objective since about 2015, when it seems like some number of elk moved into the hunt area and just stayed there. This herd actually went from being slightly under objective a couple years before that to being quite a bit over after 2015. Based on some aerial surveys that were done in the winter of 2022, we can tell we probably have about 2,000 elk in this hunt area, and the objective for this herd is 1,200. Some classification flights done in December of 2022 resulted observed calf ratios of 22 calves per 100 cows, which is actually quite a bit below what we typically see in this herd, and is actually the lowest calf ratio that's ever been observed in the Steamboat elk herd. That same flight also came up with bull ratios of 49 bulls per 100 cows, which puts us a little bit over the special management criteria of 30 to 40 bulls per 100 cows, and a lot of that is driven by younger bulls in this herd, which we'll get into a little bit more when we talk about the proposed changes for the 2023 season. So for the changes that we're proposing for Hunt Area 100 for the 2022 season, there are a couple of date changes, just calendar changes to align opening and closing dates with weekends and things like that. But the most substantial change being proposed is with the Type 2 season. Last year, that Type 2 license opened on October 22nd and was valid for antlered elk with 5 points or less on either antler, or any elk in the Forest and Eden irrigation project. And then from November 12th through the end of January, it was valid just in the Forest and Eden irrigation project. This year, we're proposing to open it up first in the Farson area. We're proposing a September 1 opener with a limitation that will be valid for any elk within 2 miles of the Farson Eden irrigation project. And that's to address some issues that we've had with elk coming into those alfalfa fields and then leaving and going and bedding on the BLM lands and not being accessible with the way the season was structured last year. The other change we're proposing is to move it from antlered elk with 5 points or less on either antler to antlered elk with 4 points or less on either antler. And that's because during classification flights last year in December of 2022, 346 bulls were classified. And of those 346 bulls, 88 were spikes, and 105 were smaller or raghorn bulls. So that meant that 56% of the bulls classified were those younger age class yearling to 3-year-old bulls. And that's the segment that's really driving up the bull ratio. But it's age classes that don't tend to get harvested by Type 1 license holders who are generally selecting for a little bit older age class bulls. So we're hoping to use this Type 2 license to help address those younger age classes that don't really get harvested much. And hopefully moving this to a 4 point or less restriction will help with that. The other proposed change is just an increase in the number of Type 5 licenses, going back from 200 licenses last year to 250. And that's because despite the fact that we've killed over 4,000 elk in this hunt area since 2016, this herd is still over its objective. So if we see similar success rates to what we have in the past, this season should harvest somewhere around 700 elk this year, which should hopefully bring this herd unit back down closer to its objective. And the last herd we will talk about is the South Rock Springs elk herd, hunt areas 30 through 32. This herd has a midwinter trend count objective as opposed to the other herds we've talked about that have a postseason population objective. And part of the reason that that objective was chosen for this herd is because we know this is an interstate population with quite a bit of interchange between Colorado, Wyoming, and to a lesser extent Utah. The number of elk that was seen during December classification flights this year, which have been used as a midwinter trend count, was 1,486. And actually for the last 3 years, 2000 through 2022, roughly that number of elk has been counted. And that's largely being driven by large groups of elk that have been seen in the southern portion of Area 32 that are elk that go to Colorado a lot during the hunting season. So as a matter of fact, when we flew this year, we didn't see any elk in Area 30. We only saw 374 in Area 31 and saw 1,112 elk in Area 32. So anyways, that has kind of resulted in this herd moving to being above its 3-year average for midwinter trend counts. The objective range for that is between 800 and 1,200 elk. And like I said, we're at about 1,500 right now. So this herd is considered over objective because of that. During those flights, we also classified elk and came up with observed calf ratios of 39 calves per 100 cows, which is slightly above the 3-year average for this herd, and bull ratios of 28 per 100 cows. And this is a special management herd, just like Steamboat elk. So the bull ratios we've been seeing for the last couple of years are actually under the special management criteria of at least 30 bulls per 100 cows. So because during the last 3 years we've been seeing pretty large groups of elk in the southern portion of Area 32 when we do our classification flights, we're proposing to increase the number of Type 4 licenses in Area 32 to help target those elk that appear to be hanging out in Wyoming at least in early December. That season for the Type 4 runs from October 7th through December 31st. So as long as snow conditions aren't too bad, people should be able to get down and access those elk still if they're hanging out in Wyoming that time of year. So we're proposing to take the 32 Type 4s from 75 to 150 to hopefully help target those elk that are hanging out in Wyoming that time of year. If you would like to submit comments on these or any other proposed seasons, you can do so by going to the Game and Fish website at the address here, or you can mail in written comments to our Casper office. Just please make sure you have any comments in by 5 p.m. on March 29th. Thank you.